a spiritual teacher said something to us, that we had been too educated and that it would be a whole different life if we just followed our hearts. And he said, I have many, many beautiful things to teach you, but your bodies are so dense that my teachings won't stay in your body. And in 43 years, people have sometimes asked, what do you believe? And where does this all come from? And I've just always said that anybody who brings a teaching to earth and it multiplies and bears fruit, then this is the energy that goes forth and multiplies.
Welcome, dear friends. What if you followed your heart for one whole year? How would your life look in 2026? This week's episode shows us what is possible. We are entering a big year in 2025, one where all the outer planets change, which is unheard of in our lifetime. As Topanga-based artist and astrologer Lily Ashwell shares, as a collective, we've been chronically disconnected from nature and spirit, where ultimately our job as humans is to be a bridge between the heavens and earth, to live harmoniously between the two, listening, humbling our ego, honoring and trusting life, being of service. 2025 is a year of extremes, collective challenges designed to empower and awaken us. Tower moments of destruction are a necessary part of the healing journey. Anything stagnant or stale must die before we can be born again in truth. Any relationship to a person, belief system, institution, or thing to which we outsource our power by looking to for answers or safety will be challenged. Uncomfortable truth will reveal themselves. What's real will remain, and what's not will dissolve. We must take radical responsibility for our own connection with the intelligence of life and recognize with humility the power of our minds in shaping reality. This is a deeply karmic time of endings and beginnings. This week, we have for you a Timeless, where we delve deep into our archives and bring you a short dose of wisdom taken from one of our epics. When feeling into what to share this week, I knew we had to do something to honor Los Angeles, which is still experiencing these intense wildfires. More than 10,000 homes have been lost, including many people I know personally, and so many friends of friends. Like any city, LA is many things. One of the subcultures I have experienced is one of community, creativity, and spirituality. Our hearts go out to anyone affected by these fires and for the unknown journey ahead. For me personally, the City of Angels has been such a powerful place, one that has really shaped who I am in the world and what I believe in. And there are so many layers to any city and so many people, and we can only barely begin to understand the impacts that a city that has such an important and profound influence on media and culture. We can barely even begin to understand what the impact of something like this happening in a city that creates and has such a profound influence on so much of the media that is watched by the entire world. LA is a city made of many different kinds of people from many different walks of life, and is now one of a growing list of places around the world suffering such deep disasters as we experience such intense planetary and systemic changes. This episode is part of a very early conversation from late one night in LA in 2018. It's with Lucile Yaney on food, healing, and consciousness. Episode 18, entitled Raising Vibrations and Starting Conversations with Food. This is a very special one to me, as meeting Lucile when I was 19 years old was such a potent moment. As I remember having lunch with her and her son that first time and being blown away as she spoke of things I have never heard about, like Atlantis and the violet flame, but understood somewhere in me And I want to deeply thank her for being such an important part of my path. Lucile Yaney is a therapist and with her husband Ralph created the restaurant, the Inn of the Seventh Ray, in the early 1970s with the mission of offering their guests the benefits of cooking without chemicals or artificial additives. What started as an extension of their personal lifestyle blossomed into a destination restaurant for diners seeking an alternative to frozen, over-processed food. Before the inn's inception, both Lucy and Dr. Ralph had their psychotherapy offices in Beverly Hills while living in the hills of Topanga Canyon near the inn. The inn is now iconic in LA, has hosted so many weddings and is a place that people go to for their anniversaries and special occasions. It's known as LA's most romantic restaurant, and I have seen a pouring of messages hoping and praying that it will stay safe from the fires. It's been a hub for the firefighters and first responders over this time. Topanga Canyon is a special place, and you can see that by how they've come together over this tragedy. If you go back into the archives and listen to the whole episode, you will get a flavor of how farmers markets started and the spiritual and organic movements we enjoy today. I highly recommend that you go and listen to the whole conversation. In the meantime, we hope that hearing just this small part will give you space to contemplate, integrate, and embody what you hear in this special timeless entitled How 1 Year of Heart-Led Living Can Transform Lives. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Tala Oak. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies, to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams, and we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible.
A spiritual teacher said something to us that we had been too educated and that it would be a whole different life if we just followed our hearts. And at the time, my husband's, and we never did give up our dharma, but my husband was a psychoanalyst and I was a psychotherapist in Beverly Hills. And we made this commitment that we were going to pay more attention to our hearts than our heads for 1 year.
Just for a year.
and got into a tremendous amount of trouble that year. And doing a restaurant was not even a thought form in our heads. There was this old junkyard in Topanga, and it was a rundown gas station, ex-gas station, and a property strewn with tires and oil and outhouses and junk cars. And down at the bottom was this very dilapidated church with one whole side falling out of it that had turned into the local house of ill repute. And we used to drive by it on our way to Beverly Hills, and I would say to my husband, I hope someone buys that property because it's the last eyesore in Topanga, which is this beautiful, pristine canyon in the middle of the Topanga Mountains, of hills and little cabins tucked away. And it was kind of an artist colony and drug hippie haven. And it had been on the market for about 5 months. And the fall came, and we drove by it one day, and I noticed when the leaves fell off the trees, I said, Ralph, the whole creek runs down one of the sides of that property. So we decided to get out and explore this land. And we climbed over all the junk cars and got out to the little point, and this energy just hit us. And our hearts opened. And so we were really without financing. And this lovely lady who owned the property just kept extending while we kept trying to look for financing. And we started construction. We started doing things that we could do with our own resources. Finally, we found a gentleman after about 2 years that would put up the money for the restaurant. However, in that time, amazing things kind of happened. And one of them was that we bumped into a spiritual teacher, and he said, I have many, many beautiful things to teach you, but your bodies are so dense that my teachings won't stay in your body. And we kind of knew what he was talking about because we'd had experience with patients where we could have what we thought was an amazing session, and a week later, anything that we said just wasn't even in their memory. It was like working, my husband used to call it working in sand. So our spiritual teacher sent me to this wonderful lady in New Mexico, Dr. Hazel Parcell, who had a clinic, and she was one of the very first pioneers in using food to heal yourself. And she herself, she was a researcher at UCLA, and she had cancer, and it was way back in the time when you would open them up, see the cancer, and close the body back up and tell people they had 6 months to live at the best. And she took this little pendulum, and she started putting pendulums over her food and measuring the energy vibrations that would come off each food. And she only started putting food in her body that vibrated higher than her body. Way before any of the research was done, and way before there was much of a body in natural foods, in this very rudimentary way of using a pendulum, she discovered that if you cooked your food in aluminum, the food would vibrate lower. If you got food that was junk food and had chemicals and preservatives in it, the food would vibrate lower than her body did. And if she went to farmers and got food that wasn't sprayed, it would vibrate higher than her body. And if she gave up meat, the meat vibrated lower than her body. So she became, in her day, an organic, vegetarian, pure foods, and put these foods into her body. And 6 months later, she went back, to see her doctor, and there was no more cancer. So then she went around and she would speak and tell people her experience, and the FDA threw her into prison 3 times. She finally wrote and created this school, and people would then come to her. And the moral of that story is she has a web presence. She was still coming to that school to teach when she was 105 years of age. On her, Dr. Hazel Parcell, on her website is a video of her speaking. But I spent 2 weeks there and came back a changed person. We actually ended up with a partner to go into this restaurant business. And then I would call the next day and say, oh, our original concept is all off. We're going to be doing something else. And then when I finally got back to Los Angeles, the first thing I did is I put Ralph on these fasts. We dewormed ourselves, did all the different kidney flushes, and Ralph of course, he was in love with me, so he just went along with all of this, kind of amused. And we started feeling really much better. We had more energy, felt really great, and we started realizing that food could make a difference of your whole energy level and your whole functioning level. So we then started with our patients. All of them went on these healthy diets. And meanwhile, we couldn't get financing for this restaurant. But this restaurant was taking this transformation. And we also found, in the course of this, the spiritual teacher that was going to be our teacher for the rest of our life. We started to learn about vibrations and energies and levels of consciousness and that whole world that we had just started tiptoeing into. And when all of that was in place, then the investor was found, made it possible for us to buy and build the inn. 73 is when we purchased it, and we didn't open it till 75. Also, in the meantime, we had this wonderful house down in Malibu, which Ralph had designed and built, which was an octagon, 3-story tall octagon house. And we got up one morning and said, this isn't where we're going. We were going on the spiritual path. So we rented the house out to start the restaurant, and the house burned down. The person we rented it to burned down the house. And here we were, basically almost paupers, because the restaurant opened and we did not make any money. And all of our salaries and everything had to go into supporting the restaurant. But we just set our sights onto our vision. And we wrote this kind of visionary paper for the front part of the menu in about 10 minutes. And it's now been 43 years. We've hardly ever changed a word of that original intent of what we were going to do. And we started combining everything that we had worked with our patients into this restaurant. And we started kind of a combination of classical music. The water element, of course, was there. Plants were there. We had a few rules, not many of them, but there was no swearing that was permitted. We hired a staff that was free from drugs, which was really hard to find at that time, and a staff that didn't smoke. And the staff all got together and we did mantras a half an hour before we opened every day. And then we began to teach the principles that I had learned from Dr. Hazel Parcell and had learned since then. And everything we did had some kind of principle behind it. So even though we served steak, it was free from antibiotics and hormones and was grass-fed. And we just started getting this body of knowledge out. And our concept, restaurants are this wonderful way to convey a body of knowledge, because on Monday morning, when people would go back to their offices, they would talk about whatever restaurants they went to or where they got the best bargains or something. So if we could put a body of knowledge onto a restaurant, would it not get spread around a city and be kind of a change agent to the culture of the city? And what happened was we just got inundated with people, and we weren't serving them very well. And Monday morning, we were really guilty because we had kept people waiting and we really couldn't pull it together. We were losing money, so we couldn't really afford to get a fancy chef, and we were struggling by the seat of our pants. But there was such a spirit and such an energy that pervaded the inn that we just kind of kept going. And we had this big placard over the kitchen set that said, "Keep on keeping on." And it's about the only thing we could do. We just didn't stop. We realized that we really had a very special protection around us, because somehow everything always worked out. About the second year in, one of our customers said, "This is where I proposed. This is where we fell in love. We're going to get married here." And he built us this wonderful little gazebo, and we made his wedding feast, and we just exchanged, and it started our weddings, which really have been the most profitable thing that probably has saved the inn. But there were a number of things that basically saved the inn from destruction. The whole field of organic produce, we actually had this farmer girl come in and say she wanted to start an organic stand. Very first one in Malibu. She got 2 other restaurants besides us that wanted to serve organic produce. And she went to the farmers and asked them, to set aside 2 acres or something and plant produce. And she would go to these farmers and pick up the produce. Some would plant one, some would plant something else, and deliver it to the inn, and then set up her stand in Malibu. And at the time, the farmers were just one by one going out of business because they would they'd be okay for 7 years, and then the 8th year some travesty happened and their plants wouldn't produce. And the corporations were owning about 96% of the farms, and the small family farms were just one by one, going bankrupt. But these little farms that we went to learned that we paid double the price, and probably more than double the price of what they would get when they sold their produce to these conglomerates. And this went on for about a year, and more people were being organic, and more stands were kind of popping up. One popped up in right down at the bottom of Topanga. And they kind of all got together with this one woman that made friends with them and came up with the idea of the farmers market, the first farmers market in Santa Monica. And these are farms that are still standing today because they got together, formed their community, went down, formed the farmers markets, which have multiplied all over Los Angeles, and converted all their farms to organic farming. So they've saved our environment, they've saved our bodies, they've saved their farms. So we became a drawing point for many people, and it's a beautiful kind of a restaurant. And at the time, maybe 50% were coming because of the food, and 50% were just coming because it was a really lovely place to go take a date. But we still kept kind of teaching and showing by example. So we served as pure a dinner as we possibly could in each of the categories. And then we listed everything on the menu in order, esoteric vibrations, what we said. And the vegetables were first, and then the fish, and then the chicken, and then the lamb, and then the steak. And so this led to a lot of joking. And of course, we named the restaurant the End of the Seventh Ray. And so people would ask what the seventh ray was. And so we gave us an opportunity to kind of give the teaching on colors and the qualities of different colors, and the seventh ray really being the violet ray, which is the last color before you go from the visible spectrum of colors to the invisible. So we would tell people that it's the last color that you meditate on as you're making the transition from the spiritual way of living to from the material way of living to the spiritual way of living. And we, gave these teachings in all seriousness. And meanwhile, we also put up on the restaurant, we did a number of little meditation gardens. So we had Mother Mary one place, and then we had St. Francis another place, and then we had Kuan Yin another place, and then we had Buddha another place, and we had a picture of Jesus another place. And in 43 years, people have sometimes asked, well, what do you believe, and where does this all come from? And I've just always said that anybody who brings a teaching to earth and it multiplies and bears fruit, and then this is the energy that goes forth and multiplies. I suspect that when we get to the other side, we're going to see Buddha with his arms around Krishna, with his arms around Moses, with his arms around Mohammed, with his arms around Jesus, and they're all going to be buddies. And it's only us down here that has to divide them. In the 43 years, I have never, that I've known, had anybody take offense. I've never had somebody tell me I'm going to go to hell because I have some statue of it. And it certainly exists, but not at the restaurant. People have generally sat there and nodded their heads, and it's kind of been okay. I mean, being a therapist, I do watch my thoughts. And I was interested to see did I have any kind of thoughts about retirement. Because I just didn't have any thoughts about retirement until maybe about 6 months ago. And it wasn't retirement, it was time to go and write and to stop business stuff. It's time for people that are younger to take over the business. And I think it was partially because there were so many demands. I had just opened up too many not too many, but I'd opened up so many avenues. I had to finish cycles to even get the energy to even think about making a transition. So, if you have 12 kids and they all have emergencies and things like this, you wouldn't stop. People who have had to take on the children of their children and raise them. And when they have these responsibilities, things in life that they have to do, then that kind of drives the pressure, drives the adrenaline, that drives the body, that drives everything. Now, that being said, I also watch my body like I wouldn't burden it, mainly because I don't think I could function if I really burdened it very much. Then I think the other source of energy is just how much time you can devote to staying kind of under your own vine and fig tree and your higher self and God and the angels and whatever you want to call it. But there's an energy that when you kind of stand still and allow whatever becomes kind of the higher sense of energies to come into your body. I think it happens when you're doing yoga, when you're, praying, when you're meditating, when you're listening to classical music sometimes. I do need to step down from the end. I mean, I have to decrease so the people can increase. But I'm not going to sit on a cruise. I'm going to start another project that I can do on my bucket list of things. In fact, I think I one time said that there wasn't. I went into my doctor for my physical. And she said, if nothing's broken down by the time you're 80 or 75, she said, you will live to 100. And you don't really have to come back here next year. And I said to her, yeah, it's going to get through my list will probably take me up until the time I'm 100. I don't think my list is going to end. And so you can put things on your bucket list.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. This is one of our timeless editions, a short and powerful piece of wisdom for you to contemplate, integrate, and embody. We have an archive of over 200 epics, long, deep conversations for you to explore, share, and enjoy. We keep this podcast advertising free as we don't want to sell you things that you don't need. This is made possible by you supporting our work as a member of Presence Collective, a patron, or through joining our offerings. You can also support us by sharing this with those that you love. Can you send it to 10 people who you know will find it powerful? This podcast is made by an all-female global team. You can explore our world at allthatweare.org and find your ways to take part. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. We exist to offer a space of sanctuary in the ever-increasing chaos, a place where you can come and be in good company, a place where you can learn, unlearn, and connect to your own wisdom. And know that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.